Assalamualaikum everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 9th episode of Rising Fintech. We never really thought we'd get this far. 9 is not a big number, but alhamdulillah, we're powering along. And mashallah, every week we seem to attract even better guests. So today we have Furquan Kidwai. He's the founder and CEO of Dawaai.pk. I think most of you must know him or must have heard about him. As I said that, I think on my post, I'm lucky enough to call him a friend. I think it's interesting. Our kids go to the same school as well, so maybe it's more deeper than just friendship. But maybe that's just on my part. But Furqan, thank you for joining us. I've been meaning to talk to you for some time on this platform because you're somebody that I've admired for a long time. I think entrepreneurship is something which is very, very difficult in Pakistan, and I think that what is interesting is that you have been in this space for quite some time. So I think that the reason for having you on board is two things. One, of course, we need to find out about health tech and how Pakistan is faring overall. But other than that, I just want to dig in a little bit in your backstory initially and to find out exactly what your mindset was.
There's a lot of echo. I can't hear you actually.
You can't hear me? Is that still a problem?
There's a lot of echo out there. I'm hearing it twice on the same thing.
Oh, that's not
I can hear myself as well.
So this happened just once we went live, right? Even before that, it was fine?
I think so, around the same time. Yes, it was fine before.
Okay. Not sure what we can do about that. Is it still there?
It is, right? So
okay. Maybe if I change my headset, although it was working fine earlier. Is this better now?
much better now. Yeah, much better.
Is it any better?
Yeah, much better now. All of a sudden,
okay. So maybe it was the headset. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now clearly.
And it's clear
and loud. Clear and loud. Perfect.
This is what entrepreneurship is all about, man. You get punched in the face and you pivot.
Of technology. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So as I said, I just want to dig in a little bit in your background. You're an investment banker. I think a lot of people dream to have that sort of career path, all the riches of the world in front of you. You said no to that, and you came into this interesting and difficult field of entrepreneurship, and especially health tech. I think when you started, there was nobody around who was doing what you're doing now. So just walk us through your background initially, and then what drew you to entrepreneurship, and then what drew you to health tech.
Yeah, thank you, Omer. Good to reconnect, right, and see you after a long time. Yeah, so about my background, I was out of Pakistan pretty much since I was 18. I was abroad for about good 14, 15 years before I moved back in 2014, partly, and then I moved back for good in 2016. Based out of London and New York in between, working in investment banking, was a trader, used to trade credit derivatives for Merrill Lynch and then RBS. It was one of those things, after graduation, I got a job offer. I got an internship while I was at the university. That internship converted into a full-time job. Frankly, money was too good to say no to. See, the idea was not to stay back. I always wanted to come back from day one. And it was one thing led to another. And those initial a couple of years of experience turned into 9 years of working. So for me, coming back was about not if, it's about when. So around 2011, 2012, I had this inkling back that this is the time to go. If I don't go now, I'll never go back. But if I go back, what will I do? Because I failed. Luckily, mashallah, I had a decent run in my previous career, was getting promoted earlier on and whatnot. So it wasn't the easiest of the move. Everyone who I spoke to was against it. But then in the end, I said, man, I'll just do it. So I didn't tell anybody before when I resigned. But before I did that, it had almost 9 months of sort of thinking and talking to people and figuring out what I'll do when I go back to Pakistan. So it was about doing something on my own. I decided on a framework, pretty much a 3-pronged framework One was obviously the starting point was it has to come back to Pakistan. So it was a non-negotiable thing. That was the first point where it started off from. The second thing was I wanted to be in a space which is big, because I was the job I was at. We were seeing huge transactions going through. So for me, it was all about being in a market which is big, which can become big. The other thing was it has to be impact driven. Since it was all about coming back to Pakistan, patriotism, I wouldn't shy to admit that was the driving factor to be back here. So it had to have an impact where I can make a difference to lives of people, and how I can improve on that. So that was effectively the paradigm. And within that, pharma stood out given the Punjab Institute of Cardiology incidents, which had just happened around the same time, and 50 people dying. Reports coming out in international media about counterfeiting becoming a major issue, availability of drugs being an issue in the country. So I thought, why not? This is something we took for granted living in the West. You go to CVS, you go to Boots, you find it. Medicine is not a point of discussion, unlike in here where you like, dawa kahan se leni hai? Sending people out, drivers going around. My mom got diabetes around the same time. So when I used to visit Pakistan, it became quite a thing that driver going out to actually buy insulin and coming back 3 hours later from a simple insulin and sitagliptin. वो तीन जगह जाके he's bringing those out. So I thought let's try and do something in that space. So it was more about improving the pharma space and the technology. And mind you, it's 2012, 2013. So the entrepreneurship wasn't fashionable. The FMCG jobs were still very fashionable. Banking
Right.
jobs were still very fashionable, and tech wasn't a thing. The fundraising wasn't a thing. So it was more about going and building a real business. So that's how I accidentally landed up in the health tech space more than anything else, and in the tech space as well, for that matter.
Mm. Interesting. So, just I'd like to dig a little bit into the fact that you mentioned that coming back to Pakistan was a non-negotiable. So, I think there's a lot of youngsters who are tuned in now because SadaPay is a brand that appeals to youngsters, freelancers, and I think that there's an element there that Pakistan is just not the place to be. It's better to be abroad. It's better to leave. यहाँ का तो system ही खराब है. But for you to come back and just make it a non-negotiable, why was it a non-negotiable? What attracted you back to Pakistan?
Yeah. So I think it was patriotism.
For people who are thinking of leaving.
Yeah. It was patriotism, right? My view was it's all easy to sit around fireside with friends from school and discuss all the wrongs in the country. And wrongs being driven by lack of people, corruption, whatever, lack of system, whatever you call it. So my view was, like, it's easy to talk. If we really feel passionate about it, let's go and make a difference and do something about it. If we don't do it, then who else, right? I thought my argument used to be we are one of the more privileged ones, more sort of fortunate ones who actually can make a difference. So it's about going down and doing it. So that's why I always wanted to come back. Plus also for sort of family reasons and everything, I wanted sort of to be in the country. Always felt more at home. I used to visit like 10 times a year when I was even based here and I started working. So for me, it was all about being here, enjoying the lifestyle, being with the family, despite having a very comfortable life back in London. Investment banking was fairly comfortable. It was a good career. And in fact, luckily I had that, which actually gave me the cushion to actually be in the space I am and have this longer run, despite many sort of troughs we have seen throughout.
Right. Interesting. And so have you ever regretted that decision?
Never regretted the decision, not at all, right? So obviously there are frustrating days in the business, no doubt about that. My kids do miss the life back home, right? Back in London, they want to go back, but I think more than that, for me, from professionally, despite starting in a sort of in a very sort of FMCG retailish industry, which I had no experience of, having worked in a fairly complicated, superly regulated, but a very intellectually challenging space, I haven't felt sort of any regret. Obviously, there are challenges. If I knew of the challenges, if I knew how long and tough this journey would be, I don't think I would have started. If I have to be very honest about it,
Really?
I thought it would be easier than it actually ended up being. But I think that's what starting up an entrepreneurial journey is all about. It's not sort of walk in the park. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it.
Everyone will do.
And a lot of people doing it for fashion now, which I personally think they're ruining their own careers, their families in a country like Pakistan, where there's no social safety net and there's a lot of reliance on young members of the family to contribute. So that's very, very important. But at the same time, entrepreneurial culture should be there. People should enter the space and try something on their own. So it's sort of have to find the right balance, but a very fine and thin line.
Interesting. And just overall in Pakistan, where do you think the next big opportunity is? Do you since you're little plugged into the startup ecosystem, do you feel that there are some areas where you would advise, let's say, your kids, if they're interested in entrepreneurship, you would say, take this vertical?
I would say consumer space, I think, is the space to be in Pakistan, given the large population with about upcoming the next 20, 30 years, with about 66 million people under the age of 15, 120 million people under 25. Your middle class growing very rapidly. Obviously, this is pre-COVID, so that all those numbers change, and we live in very awkward times. But this is certainly the space where consumer businesses are going to grow in the country, whatever that might be. Trying something funky, trying something super high tech, I don't think is the right time. We are still in internet digital 1.0 space in Pakistan. But that's the space to be if I have to advise anybody. And also, I would recommend people to go and target pain points of consumers, real pain points, rather than going after something more fashionable, where people are feeling the pinch, be it in the tax filing space. This example is how difficult it is to pay your car tax, right? Your motor vehicle tax is a nightmare, right? I have to send my driver, he goes twice to the bank, comes back, the system is down. If they can make that thing easy, anyone who makes that thing easy is going to make a difference, right? So there are many low-hanging fruits which need improvement, and I would encourage people to explore that.
Yeah, I think generally in the startup ecosystem, you're right that there are solutions looking for problems, rather than people working on solutions to problems. So I think that is a good takeaway for anybody who's thinking about coming into entrepreneurship or setting something of their own, is that you need to love the problem. Don't love the solution, right? Really, really dig deep into the problem, and then eventually stumble onto the solution, the right solution. But if you come up with a solution mindset first, oh, this seems like a great idea. Okay, now how do I, start working on this and try to find people who have this problem? And it's just not something that is very, very sustainable. So I think really good advice there. Excellent. So now let's maybe move on to you're back in Pakistan. You're thinking about this big problem, which is the health tech or the pharmaceutical space. Talk us through what happened. How did you set things up? What you did right, what you did wrong, and where you are now with Dawaai.pk.
I think the list of going wrong would be very long, right? I think we'll run out of time if I go into that. But you see that, as I said, right? So our mission is very, very simple: to improve access to medicine and healthcare in an affordable way to every Pakistani, right? I believe is a fundamental human right, right? Someone can't just go and buy medicine and end up getting a fake one or ineffective one. And unfortunately, we as a country have failed on many fronts, including this one, where we're unable to provide. So for us, it's about, can we make sure that people have access to authentic, not even quality, I would say authentic medicines at affordable prices. So for us, that is the key and the critical thing about it. We are a full stack business where we control the supply chain of it, because I believe, and also having seen through the thing, marketplace is not really a business model which is suitable for any commoditized product, leave alone medicines. Anything which is commoditized, marketplace is not, because marketplaces are incredibly hard to build. They're incredibly capital intensive, because you have to solve for two sides. One is the supply side, and the other is the consumer side, the demand side, and you end up spending a lot of money on both sides to do that, which creates significant arbitrage opportunities in the middle, in between, and that, I believe, is not something which I personally agree with. There might be people trying to do that to play the valuation game, but I think the post-COVID scenario, a lot would change. And this whole valuation game about funding frenzy globally, which we have seen, had been a function pretty much of cheap dollar available, and primarily driven by the 2008 2009 financial crisis, which fortunately or unfortunately I was in the middle of during my trading days, and that led to almost negative interest rates for almost a decade or two thereafter, now decade and a half now almost, and that led to search for yield, led to this whole venture capital boom. So once that correction happens, and whenever that happens, obviously it's difficult to time it, this whole valuation frenzy is going to disappear, and the focus will be a lot more on real fundamentally strong businesses which are actually edging towards profitability, or are profitable, right? Or at least at the operating level, at the unit economics level, they are significantly profitable. So that I believe is the story. That's what the theme, and we subscribe to that theme. So we do a full end-to-end business. So technology
Did you
underpins
start off?
everything.
Sorry, I'm interrupting, but did you start off as a marketplace and pivoted,
No, we never started off the market. We started off as a full stack
Okay.
business. We tried marketplace in the middle, but then the wrongs became very obvious straight on. So we moved away from that and moved into a very complicated and literally throwing ourselves in not just a deep end, but the deepest possible end, because operational complexity of running a full stack business is way off than a simple tech stack where you're sitting in the middle providing technology. So we do that, and that puts us in a very awkward situation at times, because the market participants, especially on the supply sides, are not really up there yet. So you're trying to change that on the distribution side, on the supplier side, and all aspects. So it's an incredibly difficult problem, but it's not a tech problem. You can use tech to solve that problem, but it's actually a real fundamental business problem, processes problem. So for us, is that a business? So we own the inventory, and we deliver to people across Pakistan at doorsteps. So it's a logistics business at heart in many ways.
Really, I think generally I think e-commerce is a logistics business at heart. People kind of only see the surface and get confused, because it once they get into it, they realize that that's not the game. The game is not a pretty website. The game is not influencer marketing. It's just logistics and keeping your promises when what you make to the customers. Interesting. So little bit more background to Dawaai. What is the main USP that you're offering? Why should people leave everything else, leave brick and mortar? Why should they come to you? What's the advantages of working with Dawaai or purchasing things from Dawaai?
Yeah, look, I won't peddle Dawaai, right? I don't think this is the right forum to be peddling Dawaai at this point. I think, look, so we are not trying to tell people not to buy offline, right? Because globally, e-commerce is hardly 10-15%. I think that's also an exaggeration, if I'm not wrong. I don't know the exact numbers of the retail market, and we are obviously will always remain a function of that. There is no replacement for brick and mortar, right? There's no doubt about that. Obviously, post-COVID things may change, but pre-COVID, it would have been foolhardy to say I'm going to eliminate the retail brick and mortar. Even I myself personally buy, and everyone, all of us, people watching out here, they use brick and mortar, and we'd all be shattered if that disappears. So that's not the case. So what we are doing, we are actually providing another channel for consumers to use if they so want to get medicine, right? That's essentially what the USP is. We will make sure that you have access to authentic medicines across Pakistan, irrespective of where you are, at your doorstep. That's essentially what we are at most economical of the prices, which is economically viable for us to do so. So that is essentially the USP. If you want access to a wide range of medicines, which is very difficult for any brick and mortar store to have, to keep, you can reach out to us and we'll try and get that for you. Okay. That is a USP, and obviously authentic in the sense that we only procure directly from manufacturers or the authentic distributors. So all the hanky-panky in the distribution and the supply chain, which happens with the introduction of counterfeit, that doesn't happen. So rest assured on that front from our side.
All right. And has COVID been good for business?
I wouldn't want to put it that way. I think for the digital space, COVID has leapfrogged the consumer base, the top of the funnel, if you say, or the baseline of people using that by, if not more, at least 9 to 12 months, right? So
Really?
the number of people who would have turned up online in the next 1 year, I think that this COVID situation has actually done that over the last couple of months, really. So it has that. It was inevitable. When we talk to our partners who still live in the old age, my view has been about, look, it's not about Dawaai, or it's not about anybody else for that matter. There is a pent up demand from users, from people, to actually use technology and make it easier for them, or however they want to access goods, or whatever they want, or services for that matter. So it's not about us. It is inevitable. So we are
Mm.
just becoming a channel for that to happen, because you see, with the traditional businesses, when you're going and they feel they're getting disrupted or whatever is happening, they feel you are actually the sort of a main protagonist of that, when you actually are not, because I'm not going and creating market. People have mobile phones. There are 75 million broadband users in Pakistan. That's not something any one of us did, right? There is about, I think, 160 million cellular mobile phone users in the country. So this seismic shift in the consumer base behavior has been in making, and it's only going to, the velocity is only going to get stronger, and it'll only accelerate right from there onwards. So that is inevitable, the change in consumer behavior. The quicker people adopt to it, from business standpoint, the better it is. Otherwise, you feel the pinch and you get sort of disrupted, and not because anyone wants you to, frankly. You just have to be in the right business, providing for what people want.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head that some things are inevitable. We can understand that Pakistan is late to the party in a lot of areas, but it's something that will happen. So I think when people kind of give up on digital in Pakistan, even in the fintech space where we're playing, people just say, "Oh, this cannot happen," and Pakistanis will always want brick and mortar, and they would always want their checkbooks. Fine, we're not saying that we're going to replace those things overnight, but the move towards digital is inevitable. Now, we can debate that it's going to take 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. That's debatable, fine. But it's not something that will reverse. I mean, we have 80 million 3G, 4G smartphone users. 1 million smartphones are coming online every month in this country. And so when you say that there is pent-up demand, there is pent-up frustration with banks in Pakistan, right? And so in our space, we're trying to solve for that. In your space, e-commerce, I mean, there is pent-up demand for e-commerce, convenience, things to just magically appear at your doorstep almost instantly. I mean, once that logistic part of it is solved. But if you can, if any e-commerce player, and I think a few have, do this hyper local or really quick delivery sort of setup in Pakistan, once that happens, and we're talking about hours of delivery time, there is zero reason for anybody to go out and do the same thing. And of course the trust factor has to be there, but I think that once serious players come into the e-commerce space, and there are, of course, it's inevitable. So I think that's a
No, I
fair
agree.
point.
Look, I was having this call earlier on with one of our partners in the business, and obviously from the middle tiers of the organization and everywhere across, you start getting here. You start hearing from people that actually you are ruining the market. You are doing whatever. And I try to explain to people, like, look, we are not in the business, or we don't get happy seeing anyone's business being affected, frankly, right? Especially in such economic times when people are, for us, we are solving and providing for people what they want, right? If they're transforming from a rather traditional channel into online, that's not something of our making. Anyone would do it. We are just happens to be in the segment where people want to use, and it's inevitable. You may want to protect the status quo, but the status quo is going to change, and it has always changed. If you read into history of like past 300, 400 years, there have been seismic changes throughout in consumer behavior and human behavior, and this is one of the changes which is happening. And this, you just have to middle it out. You accept it, that you will get cannibalized. Either you cannibalize yourself and evolve into something, or someone else is going to come and cannibalize you. That is the unfortunate reality, whether someone likes it or not.
Wow, your lips to God's ears. Um, Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into the health tech ecosystem here in Pakistan. Where do you think we are? Have we fulfilled the promise that health tech is there? What are some of the interesting innovations that you've seen worldwide that you would like to happen here in Pakistan?
Look, I think health tech is. I think it is becoming all of a sudden very popular in the post-COVID scenario because doctors aren't able to see people and patients in sort of in person due to obvious reasons. So that has becoming a play. It will be slow. I personally think, right? Health, because health A is a superly regulated industry. It's very sensitive. It's not an impulse purchase of goods or services. It's not something people do for fun. You see, so once that is the case, and with super regulation, so superly tough regulators all over the world in the space, so technology will actually start come and sort of starts complementing what's existing out there. Because see, no one can replace the use of stethoscope to on our chest for doctors to listen into our heartbeat, right? That cannot change overnight, and I don't think that's going to change. I think in our lives, in my opinion, I think, right? But I
Right.
will never say never. So health tech will always be the complementary bit, right? How technology can actually make that happen. So it will be slow. It will not be a disruption overnight. The hospitals disappear and everything becomes online. That's I think kidding ourselves. If someone needs an ICU, God forbid, they need an ICU. ICU is not just a ventilator which is set at home. It's about the team, the doctors, the nurses around you who actually provide for it, the service. So that will be there. Health will, again, as I say, technology will be used to actually complement all these services and augment them. So that has to be very clear, and we are very clear about in our head where it's heading to. And obviously, Pakistan is lags behind for whatever reasons with everything. So these changes are happening globally right now. So obviously, there will be some lag, if not a bit longer, for that to be happening in Pakistan. And I think that's how I foresee health tech to evolve. Telemedicine. Look, I think as long as this COVID situation remains, there will be some sort of tailwind with telemedicine. But I personally do not think that telemedicine will replace in-person appointments with doctors, right? It can only complement, augment, right? Follow-ups, whatever that space be. So it's I think there might be some businesses coming out now which will become huge no matter what. But I'd be very surprised if that pent-up demand doesn't taper off, because once things open up, and they will eventually, whether in 2 years, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever the time frame, things will open up and people will need to go and see their physicians, and that will not change anytime soon. And that's my personal opinion and the way I look at things.
Mm. Yeah, I think what the point here is that of course things will not change overnight, and nor they should. It's fine that change is gradual. I think anything that is abrupt can be tricky, and so I think that is there. But I think generally all over the world, again, telemedicine will gain popularity even here in Pakistan. I think it already has. That are doing really well, especially in COVID. And I think once you get used to having at least, the first checkup of something which is not hugely serious, but if you just have a doctor available to you for a cold or a fever, or your child is in a little bit of trouble, I think it's fantastic that you have a doctor available with you at 24 hours a day. Of course, for serious things, you will have to go to the hospital and everything. But it's interesting to see that COVID has really accelerated the pace of this change, and I think you kind of quantified it, that at least it's accelerated it by a year. I think we were planning to take some questions later, but I saw a really interesting one, so I'll just put it on the screen. So Mustafa Ijaz from our YouTube stream says, "Do you see health tech making its way into super apps that are going big in Pakistan, like Kareem and Paikia?" So interesting question, Mustafa. Furqan, what do you think?
Look, so I think the super app concept has been underpinned not by sort of ride hailing. I think it's more underpinned by the payment side of things, in my opinion, right? You want to be on one platform which you're able to sort of pay and sort of book a ride or do whatever. I think the Chinese were the first ones to master that, if I'm being honest, right? So why would we not want to be part of it, right? If there is now, depends on The question is about when rather than if, and if this whole super app thing actually takes off, right? Because it's too nascent a stage in the country to actually give a verdict whether super app is a thing. Because I hear a new sort of company reaching out every single day with super app concept, and it's almost funny and laughable where people aren't able to do one thing right and they want to do everything all of a sudden, right? I think it's a strange thing, right?
You
For
are a
someone
brutal
who
man,
is,
my friend.
I'm sorry, I'm not very liked in in diplomatic circles for that reason to come up and speak. But it is actually true, right? You are not an app yet, and you want to be a super app. So yes, if there is an angle, why not? It makes sense. We would, but we always analyze things from man hours perspective, right? If because man hours is a cost to us, and if any such integration being part of it, and the man hours required for that, if the cost outweighs benefits, why not? But we are yet to see that, right? And once that happens, we will. And but also I believe this in the health will be the last entrant into the super app space, right? Globally in China it hasn't happened. No, that's, I think, if you take that as the epitome of where you want to actually benchmark yourself to, it hasn't happened. There was some sort of a thing happening in Indonesia, but that failed. And I'll come back to my first argument that health is a very regulated space. You don't want to be I certainly wouldn't want to be looking at a prescription and telling my sort of one of my guys to pick medicine or give it to some a patient, right? If there's any interaction between the drugs, if the drug is in the adequate quantity for the person, not sort of an overdosage, because overdoses actually lead to very brutal results, unfortunately, including death at times, right? So all those checks are in place, and even I don't feel myself qualified. That's why we have a large team of doctors, pharmacists who actually take the onus to decide on that. And so it becomes a very specialized field, right? You it's not just moving drugs or telemedicine or anything from one place to another. Do we have the infrastructure? And it's an expensive infrastructure to build. So why would anyone want to get into this space otherwise out of desperation, which I see a lot, unfortunately, around, right? And right now with everything in shutdown, right, with health being and grocery being the essential service, everyone and their grandmother wants to be in this space. So fair enough, they can try, but it's a tough journey, unfortunately.
Interesting.
And we had access to capital. We had access to people, and we were on the earliest one in the space. And we have 6 years of experience as an institution in the company, and it's tough, right? It's not an overnight thing.
Valuable gems for anybody trying to come into this space, come into entrepreneurship. I think Furquan, the reason why I always learn something from Furquan is he's super realistic about everything, and not pessimistic, but he's realistic, and he doesn't paint a rosy picture. So really listen to what he's saying, and then make sure that you execute well. All right, so I think that let's move on to some of the pain points that you faced so far. I think from our point of view, being into digital payments, do you feel that digital payments have, or the players around have let you down? Is COD a problem for you? Do you mind it? Do you not mind it? Do you feel that digital payments need to increase big time for e-commerce to flourish?
I think, look, for e-commerce per se of goods, digital payments is good to have. MDRs, I believe, are on the higher side for that matter. But we have learned to live with COD and manage cash flows accordingly, right? So it has not remained that big a problem, if I'm being very honest about it. Having said that, for services, COD is a no-go. And I think it inhibits any usage or sort of taking services digital. Because getting people to pay and charging people for use of service is not possible with the COD format for any service, for that matter. And I believe, especially services where sort of physical interaction is not happening. Take example of telemedicine. How would you charge people? I think that's where the digital payments angle is very important. Unfortunately, from our aspect, I wouldn't say anyone has let us down, because frankly, we never had expectations from anyone yet, right? If I'm being honest about it, but we haven't, and I keep saying it out loud. We'll be the first adopter of such a service, if we can charge people seamlessly with one click. We aren't able to do that. Be it telemedicine, be it anything, right? Can someone, whilst buying sort of an appointment with the doctor or booking a lab test or buying any medicine, can he just click on the button that yes, I pay, and he pays? And Umar, you and I have discussed this thing numerous times in our conversations offline. This hasn't happened, right? And I think the one place where I've seen when I went to China and to Hangzhou, Alipay was actually doing that. And I wish something of that scale comes up. And you see, also, it's not about just someone coming with the technology, right? I always think technology is means, not an end in itself, having a technology. So unless that technology or that platform has the adequate sort of critical mass, it's of no use to us. We don't want to be the user of it where there's no user for that, right? So we don't want to just be a merchant on a platform जहाँ पे कोई user ही नहीं है. कोई यूजर वाली हो, स्टेज की हो, हम बोले ठीक है हमारा आधा यूजर बेस मोस्ट लाइकली इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे खड़ा होगा, then we'll use it for sure, why not? But that's not happening yet, or that's not there yet. We hope it gets resolved soon, and I'll be the first one to actually adopt it because we want to. But COD is not a pain. I wouldn't say COD is like the COD, because we have 40% of our business is all prepaid anyway.
Okay.
So, but irrespective of that, COD, we learned to manage COD, and we're learning. We are sort of living with it, and I've got used to it. So something better has to come, which actually makes this feel like a pain, and that hasn't happened yet. We hope, Omar, you'll be the one doing that, man.
That people are used to cash. So whatever the pros and cons of cash are, we're used to it. So whenever these digital innovations that come in, be it QR or I don't know, pay through your Fitbit or just blink and payments will go or whatever, I don't know. These sort of innovations that are kind of cooked up in a boardroom, they don't really work in the real world, because once they get out there, it's actually more of a learning curve for anyone who's involved in the process, and it just takes up so much headspace that people say that it's so much simpler to use cash. So I think that people in the digital payment space, they need to really go back to the drawing board, really dig into the user journey and figure out how they can make things easier than cash. We can again keep on harping about how evil cash is, but the average consumer or the merchant doesn't see the world the way we do. They would like to have as much cash as possible that they can have either in their wallet or in their till or in their vaults. They want to see those notes. So I think that it's very important that we are empathetic to the customer experience, to the user experience, and build products with that sort of mindset.
And Russian e-commerce is a classic example, right? I think, I don't know the latest stats, but it used to be significantly tilted towards cash on delivery, and it's a huge space, Russian e-commerce. So it has been dominated by cash on delivery for a long time and successfully doing it. So it's not necessarily a thing which is show-stopping the advent of technology. There wouldn't have been Daraz doing what they do. There wouldn't have been Kareem doing what they did if COD was that much of an evil.
Okay, excellent.
That's my view, right? Obviously, there are both sides to the argument. From AML and regulatory perspective, those are, I appreciate those. But from pure business perspective, that's the way I look at it.
Absolutely. So, Furquan, the question says where does health tech go from here, but where does tech go from here in Pakistan? Where do you see this whole ecosystem? Are you positive about it? Are you bullish about what's happening in Pakistan? Recently, there has been funding that's come in. I understand that you're not somebody who puts too much importance on funding to solve problems when it comes to the tech ecosystem in Pakistan. But do you feel that there is some good news coming out of the tech ecosystem in Pakistan? And are we on the right track? And if not, what are we doing wrong?
No, I think we are. Look, so tech, I think, is going to evolve, right? So I wouldn't be personally doing what I'm doing if I was any bearish on this space, right? I'm superly bullish on the tech space, no doubt about that. Now the question is, where do we stand? Look, every ecosystem which is evolving, these are all the sort of problems and the kind of stories you hear out in any evolving ecosystem. So it's not unheard of, right? If you read back into India in the mid noughties and then China in late 90s, you will hear these stories out, right? Even the US to some extent in the late 70s, in the 80s, when Silicon Valley was evolving essentially in 70s more so. So this is not something unheard of. There will be changes. Funding, as I said to you before, is a sort of means to enable you to actually scale a business up, right? Now, unfortunately, for whatever reasons, right, the emphasis is on wrong things for most entrepreneurs, and that needs corrected. Now we don't. My I wouldn't say my worry. My one observation is I think the successful ones out there, they're only a handful, if any, right? They don't come out often enough. The likes of Zameen, their founders, for them to come and talk the real stuff, right? How they build the businesses out there for next generation of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, unfortunately, here learning from textbook mentors, right? If I am brutal about it, textbook sort of mentors, textbook sort of business startup gurus, right? If they've ever
Entrepreneurs.
spent, well, it's like running a consulting business and running a trading business, taking over a family business, and coming and teaching an entrepreneur how to scale up within 3 years is very different to taking over something which took 100 years to build. So we need to get into the real space, right? The difference between a lifestyle business and a scaled up business. Is there a need for a scaled up business? They may not necessarily be needed to be in that business, right? In a place like Pakistan, we need more entrepreneurs supporting the families, right? Because the ecosystem, the economic ecosystem, the social ecosystem for people to live above a poverty line doesn't really exist, unfortunately. So should we be promoting everyone to be into a venture funded business? Most businesses are not even suitable for being venture funded. Right? Everyone doesn't necessarily need to be in the venture funded space. Right? So those things are important. Those things will come, I think, with time. There has been a bit of a delay. I think the reality check is needed. But definitely, I'm bullish on Pakistan. There's a pent up demand. Someone needs to channel that demand on through them and in a smart way, which is economically viable. Don't go for the frenzy. I can't comment on individual funding, but I know for a fact that the stories are very different from the headline, right? They've been staggered funding, so people just follow stuff which is not out there. You can create stories, and journalists are out there to publish those. So it's all about being real, and all about sort of building something real. Don't follow the frenzy, because then what happens is what we've seen in the COVID situation with all over the world, with what's happening with companies going under or significantly retrenching. And I've always been of the opinion, if your business cannot be in a position where it IPOs amongst real businesses, which are cash flow generating businesses, you're in the wrong space. You can be negative 2 years, 3 years. It's okay. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. It's okay to be negative. There's no issues with that. But if it's perpetual, if the negativity is being in perpetuity, then I think there's a problem. Then there's no real business. I can offer something for free to the whole world, and I'll become the largest player.
Yeah, you spend $1 and you get 50 cents back, and you could do that forever. Of course, till the money runs out and nobody's around to fund you. So
and there's lack of capital, right? In Pakistan, I think, and it's a function of global retrenchment of capital. And then there's a global retrenchment. You've always lagged behind, and if that happens, you'll be the first one to actually get capital pulled out, or not even pulled out, not coming in. It has hardly been coming in, and that will just dry out. Then what? So we've got to build a real, fundamentally strong business.
Absolutely. I think I was just saying that great point to end this conversation on, a realistic look into the tech space, the e-commerce space. Just figure out. I think the main takeaway for anybody who's listening in and who wants to get into entrepreneurship, because it's fashionable. I think the bottom line here is don't come into it because it's fashionable. Only do it if it's in your DNA. Like, you can't sleep at night because you love the problem and you really want to solve it. And make sure that it's a business that has the right fundamentals. I mean, the unit economics need to make sense. You can be in a loss for some time, but there has to be a light at the end of the tunnel. You cannot be perpetually at a loss. So Furqan, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate the time you've taken. I think this was super valuable information coming from somebody who's in the trenches. So any parting words?
No, I think be positive. Entrepreneurship will be tough for all budding entrepreneurs, all existing entrepreneurs. I think there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Just do things right. Do things which you feel are right things to do. Think of it as a shop, and can you actually trade the right way? And if that's happening, then you're in the right space. If that's not happening, you're acting on someone's pressure or something, then that's the wrong space to be in. So build something fundamentally strong.
Thank you, Furqan. Thank you again for the time. Thank you everyone for tuning in, all the people who are there on our Facebook feed, on our YouTube feed. This is I'm me signing off from Rising Fintech episode 9. We'll inshallah see you very soon for episode 10. Allah Hafiz.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Allah Hafiz.